Hello everybody, welcome to the I Am IT Geek YouTube channel. My name is Shabazz Dan, and as ever, I am the IT Geek. Welcome back to another AZ700 Designing and Implementing Microsoft Azure Network Solutions episode. We are nearly at the end of a series, I promise. It's been a very long series, but the exam prep ones are. Remember the SC300 one, we almost did 40 episodes. We're about 30-ish in at the moment, just over 30. And this is the final module. It is the final module. I've double checked, I've triple checked. It is module 5, and we're back to the normal of having myself doing the theory, and we've got a lab from Mohammed Sajid, should I say, at the end. So let's get started with this episode. As I mentioned, it's the first one in module 5. So module 5 is called Securing Network Connectivity to Azure Resources. Specifically today, we're going to talk about implementing and managing network security groups, or NSGs, and this is part 1 of a 3-part topic. We're going to talk about associating an NSG to a resource. We're going to look at creating an application security group, an ASG, and then I'll hand over to Mohammed Sajid to do the lab on NSGs. If you want to do the lab on creating ASGs, the link to the GitHub repository is in the description, so you can follow it there. I kind of picked and choose, specific labs. So we're going to do some different labs in these episodes, and we're doing all of them. We don't kind of follow the lab guide as such, but you can do the lab of creating an application security group yourself, and I highly recommend you do it. Let's get started by talking about creating a network security group. So obviously we're just talking about it. You're gonna see Mohammed Sajid do a demo shortly. You can use an Azure network security group to filter network traffic to and from Azure resources in an Azure virtual network. A network security group contains security rules that allow or deny inbound network traffic to or outbound network traffic from several types of Azure resources. For each rule, you can specify a source and destination, port, and a protocol. Obviously, Mohammed Sajid will show us more in the lab. For inbound traffic, Azure processes the rules in a network security group associated to a subnet first, if there is one, and then the rules in a network security group associated to the network interface, or the NIC, if there is one. This includes intra-subnet traffic as well. For outbound traffic, it's a bit different. Azure processes the rules in network security group associated to the network interface first, so the NIC, if there is one, and then the rules in a network security group associated to the subnet, if there is one. So it's the opposite around. And again, this includes intra-subnet traffic as well. It's important to note that security rules in an NSG associated to a subnet can affect connectivity between VMs within it. So by default, virtual machines in the same subnet can communicate based on the default sort of NSG rule allowing intra-subnet traffic. If a rule is added to the NSG that denies all inbound traffic and outbound traffic, the VMs will no longer be able to communicate with each other, so you just need to make a note of that. So what I want to do is now, again, I've done this in some of the modules already throughout the series. For those people who've been following, you'll know. I want to do a bit of a diagram, go through to help kind of explain and use a bit of an example. So what we have here is this is we've got the internet at the top, and then with our sort of HTTP TCP port, and then we've got a virtual network with 3 subnets, subnet A, B, and C. So let's look at subnet A first of all. So here we have VM, we have a NIC, and we have 2 NSGs. So for inbound traffic, Azure processes the rules in a network security group, as mentioned, associated to the subnet first, and then the NIC, if there is one. And this obviously includes intra-subnet traffic as well. We mentioned that in the last slide. So here we can see that for VM-A, security rules in the NSG-AA, so that's that first, or the one that's called NSG-AA, those are processed since it's associated to the subnet A, and VM-A is within subnet A. Unless you've created a rule that allows port 80 inbound, the traffic is going to be denied by the deny all inbound traffic security rule, and it'll never evaluate and never evaluate by the NSG-A, since NSG-A is sort of associated to the network interface. If NSG, the one with double A, has a security rule that allows port 80, the traffic is then processed by NSG-A. And then to allow port 80 to the virtual machine, both of those NSGs must have a rule that allows port 80. Okay? So if we look at now, we've got another VM, let's call this VMB, with NICB and NSGB. Sorry if you're getting confused between all the letters. What we can see here is that the rules in NSGB at the top are processed because VMB is also within subnet B, or subnet A should I say. Since VMB doesn't have a network security group associated to its network interface, it receives all traffic allowed through NSGB or is denied all traffic denied by NSGB. Traffic is either allowed or denied to all resources in the same subnet when a network security group is associated to that subnet. Okay, so a lot more simpler. VMA has like NSGA, which is associated with the NIC, and NSGAA, which is associated with a subnet, which makes it a bit more complicated. So we move on to the other subnets. We've got subnet B that has obviously VMC and NICC. Now, since there's no network security group associated to the subnet, and in this case it's associated with, as you can see, the NIC, traffic is allowed into the subnet and is processed by NSGC because NSGC is associated to the network interface attached to VMC. Okay, so again, a bit different where we've got an NSG associated with a NIC rather than a subnet. Finally, if we look at subnet C, we've got VMD. And here, traffic is allowed to VMD because the network security group isn't associated to the subnet or the network interface in the virtual machine. So all network traffic is allowed through the subnet to a network interface if they don't have an NSG associated to them. So that's like, with no NSG protection at all. So that's inbound traffic. I want to look at the same for outbound traffic as well. So we've got the same setup here, 3 subnets, same VNets, same subnets and the same VNet, and we've got the same VMs as well. So for outbound traffic, as we mentioned in the first slide, Azure processes the rules the opposite way around. So it's going to the NSG connected to the NIC first, and then it processes the NSG connected to the security group, if obviously if there is any. As we saw in our example, one of the examples, there wasn't. So here we are back with VMA. So security rules in NSG-A are processed. Unless you create a security rule that denies port 80 outbound to the internet, the traffic is allowed by the allow internet outbound default security rule in both NSG-AA and NSG-A. If NSG-A has a security rule that denies port 80, the traffic is denied and never evaluated by NSG-AA. To deny port 80 from the virtual machine, either or both of the NSGs must have a rule that denies port 80. And then again, we'll move on to VMB. So that's in subnet A again. All traffic is sent through the network interface to subnet since the network interface is attached to VMB, doesn't have a network security group associated with it. And the rules in NSGB are processed. So because the NSGB is associated with a subnet, all traffic is assessed by that, and the NIC sends everything straight out. So we've got VMC again, it's got its NIC and its NSG, but obviously this time the NSG is associated with the NIC. So if NSG has a security rule that denies port 80, the network traffic is denied. If not, the traffic is allowed by the allow internet outbound default security rule in NSG, since the network security group isn't associated to subnet B. So the final one, here's again, no all traffic is allowed from VMD because the network security group isn't associated to the network interface attached to the virtual machine. So that diagram actually has an error. There should be no NSG up there, but there is. Because there shouldn't be any NSG associated here, so all traffic's allowed out. So let's talk about associating an NSG to a resource. Again, this is something that I believe Saj is going to cover in the lab, but if not, it's you can cover it yourself using the GitHub labs. You associate an NSG to a network interface, or you can associate it to a subnet, as we've mentioned. You do this through the Azure portal through PowerShell or Azure CLI. So hopefully, I'm going to hand over to Mohammed Sajid now, who's going to cover that in the lab. So over to you, Saj.
Thank you, Shabazz. Hi, everyone. So in this demo, we're going to quickly take a look at how to create an NSG. So if you want to deploy an NSG, search for Network Security Group or NSG, select Network Security Groups, and then from the create, select create. And it's a fairly easy process. Select subscription if you've got more than one subscription. Select your resource group. So we'll stick with our demo resource group, give it a name, AZ700. I'm sticking with our naming convention, NSG 0.01, and the region that you want to deploy it in. If you're defining any tags in the environment, define the tags here, and then select review and create. And once you're happy with what you've defined, there's not a lot to define really, select create, and you've created a NSG. Thank you for watching. Back to you, Shabazz.
Thank you, Saj. A very, very informative lab this time on creating NSGs. So I hope you find that informative and hope found that helpful. Saj has been great with the labs. A massive thank you to Saj. It's been great working with him on this series, obviously. So yeah, that's it. We've started module 5 now. As I said, this topic of NSGs is a 3-parter. So this is part 1, and we'll have part 2, part 3 coming up. So hope you enjoyed it. There's links to mine and Saj's socials in the description, as well as the GitHub lab repositories where the labs are. So by all means, follow them along yourself. But please do drop me or Saj a comment on the video, or obviously reach out to us on Twitter or LinkedIn. Don't forget to like, don't forget to comment and subscribe. I'm so happy with my growth at the moment. It's all thanks to you. By all means, let me know what you think. So thank you for watching, and until next time, goodbye.